be like, sit down, please sit down. Thank you so much. Y'all are so encouraging. I'm so glad you came this morning. Goodness. I just wanted to say, you guys, our pastors had their baby. Are you guys? I know. I just want to remind you, who remembers the Sunday, it might have been multiple times that Pastor Alex shared with us how they had, I'm out of breath now, y'all got me laughing, how they had tried to get pregnant and hadn't been able to. You remember that? And you remember the Sunday that Sam stood here and shared the heartbreaking story of how they'd gotten pregnant, but they'd lost the pregnancy? I think it's so cool that they invited us in. Like, they didn't have to invite us in, but they did. And because they did, we got to pray on their behalf. We got to seek the Lord for them. We got to beg the Lord for this gift. And so I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we are living in the victory that we ask God to bring us, right? Like, how cool is this? He listens to our prayers. And it's not just the Galleons praying. It's not just Rome, the only new baby here. You can walk by kiddos and you see all the answered prayers, right? And just like, I'm just going to talk about the last couple weeks, or not weeks, the last couple months. The Wallers have a baby they begged God for. The Boxes have a baby that they asked God for. The Mansfields have a baby. Like, I'm just thinking the future is bright. I'm pumped about this next generation, right? I'm pumped about what God's doing in our prayers, and I'm pumped about what he's doing in these babies. And I'm just so glad we get to be a part of it. And I also just want to say that if we believe the Bible, if we believe what we read in the Bible, then the hope and the excitement and the anticipation we have for their lives, that's on our lives too, right? Because you can't read the Bible without seeing how much he loves you and how he has a plan for you and a purpose for you, right? And y'all are so talkative. This is so great. So one of my favorite verses is in Revelation, and it says, he created all things, and he creates what he pleases. So he's pleased with you. He likes you, actually. You bring him joy. And I just want to say, if that's hard for you to receive, if you cannot believe that, I hope that this morning's message is helpful for you, because we are in week 6. Can y'all believe week 6 of a sermon series on worship titled The Heart of Worship. And we have learned a lot about what worship is in these last 5 weeks. Like, we've heard from Pastor Alex. We even got to hear from some of the worship team. How cool was last Sunday? So cool, yeah. Last Sunday was so cool. So we've learned a lot about what worship is. We know worship at this point. Worship is when we give the Lord, when we worship him, we're giving him all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our soul, all of our strength. He wants it all, right? This is not a new concept. He's always wanted all of you from the beginning. This has always been his plan. He always wants all of you. He wants your heart in this room, you know, in the middle of worship. He also wants your heart when you're at home and alone. He wants your mind when you're in the depths of Bible study. And he wants your mind when you're at your job or wherever you are. So worship is this really intimate act that we get to participate with the Lord, right? This really cool activity that's intimate between us. And when we were planning this worship series, I'm still out of breath. When we were planning this worship series, I'm a question asker. I'm always asking questions. I will never do something just because you tell me to. Like, I need to know why. And so as we're talking about worship, the question that kept coming to me was, why worship? Why do we do this? Like, why isn't loving him enough? Why can't we just serve him? Like, why isn't our service what he wants? Like, why does he want our heart, our mind, our soul, our strength? Why does he want it all? And so when I have big questions, I'm going to go to the Bible. Are y'all cool if we go to the Bible and see if we can find an answer for why we worship? We're going to be in Exodus 3. We're going to look at the life of a guy named Moses. So if you want to flip there, I've got to give you some backstory, though. You got to know where we are before we can get here, or how we got here. So Moses was born in a really scary time for Israel, okay? For the last 400 years, the Israelites have been living in Egypt. And they came because 400 years before, there was an Israelite named Joseph who God raised up, long story there, but God raised up this guy named Joseph to rescue God's people in the time of a famine. And at the time, Pharaoh loved and honored Joseph so much that Pharaoh was okay with Joseph's entire family coming and living in Egypt. So now the Israelites are in Egypt. And in this 400 years, God's favor has been on them, and they have just been growing and growing and multiplying and multiplying. And Joseph has died. And the Pharaoh that knew Joseph, he is also gone. And so this new Pharaoh doesn't know Joseph, doesn't honor Joseph. And he's a little insecure, this guy. And he's afraid because when he sees these thousands and thousands and thousands and probably more thousands of Israelites, he's like, it wouldn't take much for them to rise up and take over. So we got to fix this population problem, right? So he has a plan. And he's like, okay, we're going to enslave them. We are going to work them so hard and we're going to make things so oppressive that they are not going to have any energy or free time for the population growth. You got me? Like, they're not going to have any time to do the thing to make more population. So that was, y'all are catching on. Okay, so that is his original plan. But the problem with that is Pharaoh doesn't know God. And he doesn't know that God's favor on the Israelites was not dependent on their circumstances. Like his favor was still being poured out and poured out. So they just kept growing. They just kept multiplying. So Pharaoh's like, okay, got to have another plan. So at this point, he decides he's going to call in all the midwives, the Hebrew midwives. And let me just stop right here and say, the word Hebrew and Israelite are interchangeable, and I could go back and forth. Just know it's the same person, okay? So anyway, you can stay with me. So the Hebrew midwives, he calls in the Hebrew midwives. And he's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. When you go to a labor and delivery and it's a girl baby, you can let her live. But if it's a boy baby, we're going to drown him in the Nile. And I want you to know, the Bible tells us the name of two of these women, the two of the midwives. Their names are Shiphrah and Puah. And I need you to know, these should be household Bible names that you should be talking about. Can y'all say Shiphrah and Puah? Because at risk to their own lives, time out. I got out of order. He told them when you go to deliver a baby, if it's a boy baby, you kill it. That's what he said. And at risk of their own life, they don't do the thing. They let all the boy babies live. And over time, Pharaoh realizes, hey, something's going on. Like, they didn't obey me, so he calls them in. He's like, hey, girls, what's going on? And they give him some excuse. And so he's like, now this is the next plan. Now, since you haven't already killed them, we'll just take all the boy babies and drown them in the Nile. And it's really sad that the source of life, the Nile River, was a source of life for Egypt, but it was going to be the source of death for Israel. And this is precisely when Moses is born. Perfect timing, right? So Moses is born to a woman named Jochebed, a Hebrew woman, who knows if this is a boy, I'm not allowed to keep it. I'm not only not allowed to keep it, but I'm supposed to kill it. And so Jochebed does not want to do this thing. And so for 3 months, she hides him away secretly, and she does, at risk to her own life, she does not follow Pharaoh. And she has this idea about 3 months of his age, because at 3 months, babies are getting more mobile, and their coos are getting louder, and their cries are getting louder, and there's no hiding. There's no hiding of it. There's no secrecy to be had. And so she knows, I've got to do this thing. Like, I have got to obey Pharaoh. I've got to throw my baby in the Nile. But she gets creative about how she's going to do it. And so Jochebed goes and she gets some reeds that were growing along the Nile, and she weaves them into a basket. And she waterproofs this basket. So she's made a boat basket. And the Bible doesn't say this, so this is the Bethany version. But I believe that the whole time she's making this basket, that she is crying out to God. And she's like, you've got to be here. You've got to make this feeble plan work. Like, I need you. And so she makes the basket, and she goes to put him in the Nile like she's supposed to. But she's even creative with where she places the baby in the basket in the Nile. And the Bible doesn't say this either, okay? This is back to the Bethany version. But I just think, like, she's had a lot of time to think about this, right? It takes a long time to have a baby. And she's had him for 3 months. So I think she's had enough time to think about it. And I just wonder if in her agony, this is how I read the Bible. If in her agony and in her distress, I wonder if she just paced the Nile, wondering what to do. Like, paced the edge of the Nile, just wondering, what am I going to do? And I wonder if she just happened to notice that Pharaoh's daughter would come about the same time, about this time of day, to this certain location. And I wonder if the plan started to form in her mind about what she would do. And maybe God just told her where to place the basket. But it was no coincidence that she puts the baby in the basket just upstream from where Pharaoh's daughter would come to bathe. And Jochebed's not done. She has eyes on this basket in the form of Miriam. Miriam is Moses' big sister. Don't you just love Moses' story? So far, this is really exciting. His story is one woman after the other risking their lives to save his, is what's happening. So Miriam, this unsuspecting little girl, is just watching this basket. And she sees the basket get caught in the reeds. And she sees that Pharaoh's daughter gets the basket, opens the basket, and looks at this Hebrew baby that she knew, Pharaoh's daughter knew what her daddy had said was supposed to happen to this Hebrew baby, and probably at risk to her life. She has compassion on this baby, and Miriam is ready. Miriam's watching and waiting, and Miriam rushes in, and Miriam says, hey, I know a Hebrew woman that could raise this child for you. And so Moses gets to go home with his sister to stay with his mama to be raised, all while Pharaoh's daughter is paying her to do it. Isn't that so cool? That's so cool. This is a really cool story until the part where Pharaoh's daughter wants the boy back, which is heartbreaking. And so he goes back, he goes to the palace, and Moses is raised under the same roof with the man who wanted him dead. I could not imagine what that was like. And I don't think it took Moses long to realize that he wasn't an Egyptian, even though he's raised with the Egyptians. He's like, I'm not an Egyptian. And I wonder, he realized, I'm a Hebrew, and the Hebrews are all slaves. What's going on? And I wonder if, out of curiosity, did he go and just wander around where the Hebrews were and just see, I wonder if he was thinking, what would my life be like if I'd stayed in the family that I grew up? I don't know what he was thinking. But while he's out among the Hebrews one day, he sees an Egyptian beating a Israelite. And something comes over Moses, and he kills this Egyptian. And it doesn't take long for word to get back to Pharaoh about what's happened. And Pharaoh's like, yep, exactly. This is exactly what I thought was going to happen. You all guys are going to rise up, and you're going to defeat us. You're going to kill us. This is exactly what's happened. I wanted to kill him in the beginning. Now I'm really going to kill him. And so out of risk, or out of self-preservation, Moses flees from Egypt and runs. He ends up in Midian, and that's where we're going to pick up today. Exodus 3:1. We're reading about Moses. One day, Moses was feeding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of the bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses thought to himself. Why isn't this bush burning up? I gotta go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Don't come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the Lord your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So we already know this is a cool story, but one really cool part of this story is that we get to see a theophany. And a theophany is just this fancy theological word that means that God's presence, his actual tangible person, the person of God, was in the fire. So it's not his voice, it's not his essence, God is actually in the fire. And Moses seems to realize this is a big deal. Before he even knows God's in the fire, what's he do? He's amazed and he wants to get closer. What a word. Do you ever find yourself amazed and wanting to get closer? You see God's doing something in you, or God's doing something in somebody near you, and you find yourself amazed, wanting to get closer? Do you think he's worth getting closer to? Is he worth getting to know? Because I just want to ask, if we're talking about worship, how do you expect to rightly worship a God you don't know? You've heard in this church multiple times that how you know God, how you see God, what you believe about God is going to affect every single part of your life. And so when we read the word, we want to get to know him. We want to see what his character's like. And when we look in this story of Moses and the theophany of the burning bush, we learn a lot. we see God's power and his glory and his holiness. And how do we see that? We know God is holy and set apart because as soon as Moses hears who's in the bush, what's he do? He covers his face. He's like, whoa, I'm not worthy to be here. Like, I'm not you. And God asked him to. God said, hey, I need you to step back. This is holy ground. I need you to step back. And you know, Moses steps back, but do you know what Moses doesn't do? Moses doesn't run. Like, he's not like, okay, God's really present here. Like, this is a theophany. You think he said that? This is a theophany. God's really here. Like, I'm a really bad person. Like, I'm horrible. I'm a murderer, okay? I don't need to be on the mountain with God. I need to be under the mountain, right? He didn't do that. He didn't run. And you know what's very important is God is not asking him to. God came to him. God closed the gap between the two of them, came to the mountain. If Moses were to run, that would have been so disrespectful. It would have been counterproductive because what God was asking for was honor and respect and awe, and that is exactly what Moses gave him in the form of him staying. He stepped back, but he stayed. And I think that's a word for us too. When things aren't going the way you want them to go, when God's not answering the prayer as fast as you want him to and in the way you want him to, when you do not understand what's happening around you, don't leave him. Honor him with your staying. Because it's when you stay close to him, that's when you really get to know him. And that's what happens here with Moses. Because Moses, he stayed, and then God gives him like secret intel on why he's there. He's like, the next 4 verses is God telling Moses why he's there. He's like, I have heard the cries of my people. They are suffering. I'm not okay with it, and I'm gonna do something about it. Moses, let's go. You're gonna go with me. And how cool is that? Here we go. Another view into God's character. The God you serve, he hears your cries. He sees your suffering. He is not okay with it, and he has a plan to rescue you. And you may not know the plan, you may not see the plan. The Israelites that were slaving their lives away in Egypt had no idea that Moses was on the mountain with God. You may not know the plan, but he has the plan and he's coming for you. And so, we see that God has told Moses who he is. So surely Moses is like, let's go do this thing. This sounds so cool, right? Let's read. Let's see what Moses' response was. Exodus 3:11, but Moses protested to God. Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Well, okay then. I thought since God told Moses who he was, that Moses knew who he was. But these questions that Moses is asking lead us to realize that just because you know him doesn't mean you know him. Right? And I am not making fun of Moses. I'm not being critical of Moses. Honestly, I love this. I love that we get to see that Moses is asking questions because that tells question asking Bethany that if a hero of the faith can ask God questions, then so can I, right? He can handle your questions. And also, more than that, I love that we get to see God's response to his question. God has told him who he is. He knows the power of God. God has called him to do this thing, and he answers with doubt. Here's how God answers him, though. Exodus 3:12, I will be with you. This is your sign that I'm the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship me on this very mountain. There's no condemnation. There's no exasperation from God toward Moses. God does not treat Moses like we treat little people who ask us crazy questions that we're like, we've already told you the answer to that. Like, do the thing. No, like Moses had logical questions, likely out of fear, likely out of insecurity, but they're logical because as far as Pharaoh knows, his murderous grandfather's still alive and well and ready to take him out, right? So when Moses says, who am I to go to Pharaoh? He's saying, if I go, I'm a dead man. And when he says, who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? He's saying, the gossip's out. Like they know I'm a murderer and a coward because as soon as I got busted, I ran. So whatever prompted Moses' question, it doesn't change God's answer. God is still patient. He's still kind. And he even gives him a sign to boost his confidence. Because when God says, you're going to come back here and worship me, what he's saying is, Pharaoh's not going to kill you. You get to live. And after this is all said and done, you get to come back here to this familiar territory, and I will still be with you. So, okay, God's so encouraging. He's so patient. He's so kind. Now, Moses is ready to go. Moses is ready to do the thing, right? Wrong. Y'all know the story. Let's go. Exodus 3:13. Moses protested again. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they're going to ask me, what's his name? Then what should I tell them? Okay, there's so much happening in this part right here, so much, but I want to focus on this. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house. So Moses can appreciate authority, the need for authority. And Moses also realizes, as it goes with Israelites, he has no authority. Moses was born in the home of a slave, but that's not where he grew up. He grew up in the palace with freedom and everything he could ever want. Well, except maybe a murderous or a loving grandfather. He did not have that. But he had everything. And so in his eyes, he's a traitor. In Moses' eyes, his life and his words carry no value at all. And it's almost like he's getting it, right? He's almost like maybe he's realizing that his name is not the one that matters, right? He's like, my name means nothing. It's your name that holds the power. And it reminds me of what Jesus told his disciples in John 15:5. This is an awesome story. So Jesus tells his disciples thousands of years after Moses, Jesus says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I remain in you, woo, you're going to produce a lot of fruit. But apart from me, you can't do anything. So apart from God, Moses was purposeless and powerless and hopeless, but with God, he was about to endure the most exciting, challenging, thrilling adventure of his life. And that's saying a lot for a guy whose first trip was alone in the Nile River in a basket his mama made during arts and crafts. So it sounds like maybe he's getting it. That the story is not about him. It's not dependent upon him. What God's calling him to is not dependent upon him, but it's God's name that matters. And I feel like it's kind of the question that we were asking at the beginning. Moses is saying, who are you? What's your name? Why do I worship you? And so let's see what God answers. Verse 14 and 15, God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations. So God told him his name, but God also gave him a peek into his character. Because when he says, I am who I am, God is saying, I do not change. God does not change. He is steady. He is stable. He is dependable. He is consistent. Whoever he was is who he is, and it's who he's always going to be. And that, you may not realize, but that is the best news you could ever hear. Because his goodness, if he doesn't change, his goodness depends on him, not you. And if he doesn't change in his love for you, you don't have to earn it. He already gave it to you. It's already yours. Whatever circumstance life has got thrown at you, he is still God. He's still on the throne. He is unchanging. He will, because he is always faithful, he can never let you down. And then another really cool thing about his name, you heard him say, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he named these three guys. These guys, he named them because he made a covenant with them. So he's given them all kinds of promises. One promise was, you remember this? One of his promises was, I will give you many descendants. Hello, population problem in Egypt, right? And then another one of his promises, how many of you were here for the Galatian vacation this summer? Anybody? We were in Galatians 3. Let's read what we learned this summer. Galatians 3:29 says, and now that you belong to Christ, you are the true children of Abraham. You are his heirs, and God's promise to Abraham belongs to you. So if God doesn't change, then his promises don't change. And the promise that he made to Abraham, the most important one, which was, I will never leave you, I will always be your God, that promise is for you. What could he say that would be any more important to you than I love you? Actually, I like you. And I'm never leaving. I can't change. This is the best news we could hear, because if you know that about him, then you know him. And when you know him, worship is the only natural response to follow. It's just the thing that happens. I was thinking, like, when Sam's labor started the other day, like when her contractions started, not the fake ones, but the real ones. Y'all all know, right? If you don't know, you need to know. There's two kinds. When the real ones happened and her labor was on its way, the only natural response to that was the birth of her baby, right? If you initially go a long time without eating food, initially, the only natural response to that is for your belly to growl, right? Yeah. And here's a good one. If you see somebody next to you yawn, what's the only natural response to that? You're gonna yawn. Everybody's in the room's yawning now. Yeah, you're gonna yawn too. It's a natural thing. It just happens. Like, you don't will yourself to yawn. It just happens. You don't try really hard to make your belly growl, right? It doesn't happen. It just naturally, like that just naturally happens. And when you know the God of the burning bush, the God who created you with a purpose because he likes you, when you know him and he's the one that holds all power, the only natural response to follow is worship. So you can worship with your mind and you can worship with your heart, you know. But did you know that your heart and your mind are also attached to your body? And I am really expressive. I don't know if you've noticed that yet. Like, this is killing me to have to hold this thing. Like, I want to use both my arms. I want to be all over the place. Sometimes I'll just be talking about what God can do, or I'll be in the middle of prayer, and before I know it, my arms are like shooting outside of my body, and I'm on my feet, and I'm just so pumped. But I want to tell you, that was not always me. It was not always this way. Like, there was a time in my life where if I were to be that big or that expressive, it would have felt so disingenuous. It would have been so fake. It would have been such a lie. And I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but like, I grew up in church, so I knew that God loved me. Like, that was something they told me over and over. God loves you, right? But I didn't realize he liked me. You know, I just thought, man, he just rolls his eyes at me. Oh, he's so disgusted with me. Can I ever get it together? I keep coming to him with the same stuff over and over. I'm just a broken record. Like, he rolled his eyes at me. And I think some of you may feel the same. Like, you're like, hey, I'm not worshiping not because he's not worthy. Oh, I know he's worthy. I know he's good. I know he's holy. But it's me that's the problem. I'm not worthy to worship. I think some of us believe that if we were to like really go there and worship, like if we were to like move our body in response to what he's doing in our heart and our mind, if we were to raise our hands in some way, then he would look down from heaven and he would look straight at us and say, excuse me? I know you. You are despicable, okay? You just need to wipe that despicable expression off your despicable face and put your hands back in your pocket because you are fooling nobody. And the problem with that is not the Lord. That is not the voice of the one who came, the God who came to Moses, a murderer named Moses in the form of the burning bush, has come to you in the form of the Holy Spirit. And the Spirit of God is burning inside of you. And he is saying, look at me. I love you. I like you. When you know God, when you're around, when you are close enough, when you stay like Moses did, when you stay and you get close enough, close enough to get warm, there's going to be a change in your life. And it's really good news for you to hear that God cannot change. But it's really good news for you to hear that you can. Are you selfish? You can change. Are you overcome by low self-esteem or anxiety? Are you greedy? It's like somehow the enemy has us believing that we are so amazing, that we are so stellar, that the man or woman you are today is the man or woman you are going to be for the rest of your life. Are you addicted to something? Anybody? Oh, you're going to be that forever. You're going to be addicted forever. Yeah. You're lazy forever. Depressed, you are going to be depressed forever. But that's just not true. Because the one who makes change. It doesn't just, you can't remain stagnant when you are with the one who makes change wherever he goes, where blind can see, where deaf can hear, where dead rise. And you want that. I know you want that, because when you know him rightly, and when you know he wants you, even though he knows all about you, there's an attraction, there's a pull from you for him. When you know he wants you and he knows all about you, you just want more of him, right? You just get closer and closer. So if you really believe that you're never going to change and that the sin that you have, it's just too much for him, well, then you think too little of him and too much of you. You're really not that special. We're all sinners. Yeah. We're all loved and wanted. And the perfect blood that perfect King Jesus shed at the cross to cover your sin, it's more than enough. It's more than enough. And you know what's also really cool is the more you are drawn to the Lord, the more you know him and the more you stay and the more you get to know him, like you just don't want to leave. Like this is just where you want to be. And also the closer you get to him, the farther you get from your sin, right? And I feel like some of you are like, that's the problem. Like, I can't leave my sin. I have tried. I have deleted her number from my phone. I've joined a small group. I went to counseling. I got a gym membership. Come on, I'm trying, okay? I have poured all the alcohol down the drain. Like, do you know what that costs me? I have tried. I cannot leave my sin. Yeah. Jesus knows. He knows all about your sin. Because he's sitting right now at the Father's right hand in a body that bears the scars of how he paid for your sin. So he never expected you to overcome it. You're far too weak and you're far too arrogant. You can't leave your sin. It's just what Jesus said. Apart from him, you can do nothing. So the hope is, stop looking at your sin, stop looking at you, and give your focus to Jesus. Because he's the unchanging one. He's the one who makes changes wherever he goes. The question is not, who am I? The question is, who is he? And we are going to go into a time of response. Because when you hear the gospel of Jesus, there's a response that's required of you. You don't just hear and are unmoved. Like, you hear God has been talking to you during this. You know where you are. You know, are you worshiping him as he's called you to? Are you giving him everything, everywhere, at all times? Does he have your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength everywhere? When you're alone? He doesn't just want it in here. So that's what you're going to answer. You're going to sit in your seat and you're going to talk to the Lord. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to look him in the face. And you're going to say, Lord, is there anywhere that I have not been faithful to give you all of my worship? And respond to him. When he tells you the answer, don't run and try to hide. He came to you to tell you the answer. Stay. Let him talk to you. And if you find yourself not worshiping him because you feel like he's not worthy, talk to him about it. Remind him of the times he's good. Think of specific instances where he's been good to you. We're going to take just a minute. We're going to pray in our seats. Gerald's going to play for us. And I just want you to look at the Lord. I really want you this to be you and the Lord only. Nobody else is in the room, okay?